be doing. We're going to be bringing in whilst hopefully.
Three, four, five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, good. Right, ladies and gentlemen, what a rare privilege we have before us now as well. We are going to have a debate with your questions. We're going to go about 30, possibly 40 minutes, depending on how we go and depending on how the conversation goes. And the conversation here with this amazing panel is treating the climate crisis like a crisis. This is going to be a conversation on rapidly accelerating the energy transition as well. The topics covered will include the fact that the climate crisis remains at the heart of global attention, and it must not slip down the ranking in terms of top priorities. And I can tell you already, ladies and gentlemen, that that is going to come up straight away, because in the rarefied halls of the World Economic Forum, there is a danger, there is a concern that the climate crisis is slipping down the agenda. We're going to talk about 1.5 degrees. Is it dead? The pathway is narrow, but still achievable. I think everybody on this panel still believes that as well. Clean energy transition is at a turning point. It is happening, but it's not fast enough, according to many, many people. Again, I think what you're going to find today is there's a lot of accord between what the IEA is saying, which, let me remind you, represents the OECD nations, represents the consuming nations on energy products, and a lot more than that as well. And there is an urgent need to scale up actions and investments. Advanced economies especially need to do more. I already know what this panel thinks about the COP process. So should you, if you've been paying attention. I'll tell you who's here. What an amazing meeting of minds. Dr. Fatih Birol is someone I've known for many years, and I've had the privilege of a lot of private conversations with, and a lot of public conversations with as well. He, of course, is Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. Vanessa Nakate is a Ugandan climate justice activist, UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. It's lovely to see you today. Luisa Neubauer is a climate activist. Hello, Luisa, and founder of Fridays for Future Germany. We also have Helena Gualinga, who is an Ecuadorian environmentalist and human rights activist. It's lovely to see you. And Greta Thunderberg, who is a Swedish climate justice activist. One or two of you may well know the ladies here as well. So there are a lot of questions. You've got a lot of questions as well. But I'm just going to start off with a very open question to the people here today. And I'm going to start off, and I'll just go from my immediate right, and I'll work all the way down to Dr. Birol at the end. Greta Thunberg, I'm just going to ask you what your message is for the World Economic Forum here, Ben. It's very nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for, so we are right now in Davos, where basically the people who are mostly fueling the destruction of the planet, the people who are at the very core of the climate crisis, the people who are investing in fossil fuels, etc., etc. And yet somehow these are the people that we seem to rely on solving our problems, where they have proven time and time again that they are not prioritizing that. They are prioritizing self-greed, corporate greed, and short-term economic profits above people and above planet. And we seem to be listening to them rather than the people who are actually affected by the climate crisis, the people who are living on the front lines, and that kind of tells us the situation, how absurd this is. But the people who we really should be listening to are not here. Instead, we are bombarded with messages from people who are basically the people who are causing this crisis.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Well, for me, coming here, I didn't know exactly what my message would be, because what haven't we said, and what haven't we done? What haven't we, communicated enough? The climate crisis is evident in the areas that are most impacted. Most cases, these areas are least responsible for the crisis, where people are stretching their livelihoods, people are trying to survive, clinging to, clinging to their lives and just trying to make it for another day, to make it for another week, to make it for another hour, another minute. So for me, my message is the climate crisis goes beyond statistics and data points. It's about the people. And very so often in this place, there is a disconnection between, what is being discussed and what is happening on the ground. There is a mismatch between how people understand, the urgency of the crisis here and what is happening in places like Turkana, one of the regions that is being impacted by the drought in the Horn of Africa, which I was able to visit last year. And I met different mothers, different children that are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. And it is devastating to continue to see what the climate crisis is doing to communities and doing to children and different mothers across the world. And one specific child that stood out for me is a child that I met with his grandmother in a hospital where cases of severe acute malnutrition are referred for treatment. And I remember meeting the grandmother and her explaining how, it took them long to find the treatment. And by the time they brought, the child to the hospital, he was in a wasted situation as described by the doctors and the nurses. And she was just praying that the child would survive. And I mean, a few hours later, we learned that this child had passed away. And this could have been our preventable death and a preventable crisis. So I feel frustrated too. I don't know what else to say, because the urgency of the crisis is evident and people are dying, and it's like our leaders are playing games and they don't see the challenge that is happening. I am frustrated and I'm so hurt by what is happening and the inaction. Why is it so hard for people to understand the urgency of what is happening? We could save very many lives because so many people are stretching to try and survive the next minute, the next hour, the next week, the next day. And here the discussions are on growth, development. Why don't we slow down a bit and talk about lives and people? It's just frustrating.
Vanessa, thank you very much indeed for that. Helena.
I come from an indigenous community in the Amazon rainforest, and for decades we've seen how our forest has been cut down, again in the name of development, for oil exploration, for extractivism. The same industry that has caused the climate crisis is also destroying our territories. And while they're at it, they're also committing human rights violations. We don't see the sense of urgency reflected in action. Indigenous communities, indigenous peoples, youth, scientists, we've all been pointing towards a direction where the oil industry they're not going there. They're not going there. The world leaders are not going there. And something that Vanessa said, like, we're frustrated, but what else can we do? We've said everything, we've done everything we can, and And still we're going into this really, really dangerous direction. We're taking a really dangerous path. And we're already seeing how people are suffering on the ground. We see that every day in our lives. And you know, it's completely insane that we are allowing this. And we have people here in Davos that are enabling that through government, through investing in fossil fuel, and at some point there needs to be a stop. This is criminal. This is criminal behavior, and it should be judged as so as well.
Louisa.
Yes, I'm a climate justice activist from Germany, and I spent the last week with Greta and many others defending livelihoods against coal diggers in the Rhineland in Germany, which is the largest single source of CO2 of the whole of Europe. And many people then said, oh, that's an interesting change of scenery coming from the mud in Lützerath to Davos, whereas we walked through the dirty mud in Lützerath, and now we in Davos witnessing dirty deals being made. So I'm not sure how much of a change that actually is. Chancellor Scholz yesterday said that the future belongs to renewables. And I think there's one part of the sentence that he left out, which is the future does not belong to the fossil fuels. And if we look at the business plans, however, of the big fossil fuel industries worldwide, 96% of oil and gas industry plan to expand, even though we know that the science is very clear, the numbers are very clear, there cannot be any fossil fuel expansion happening everywhere. Yet the business plans and the investments plans, they tell a different story. And what does it mean? What kind of messages coming from that? And the message is, I think, quite clear. The future will not belong to the fossil fuel industries, but they won't lead into that future themselves. As long as fossil fuels get to make the rules of the end of the fossil fuel era, there will not be an end of the fossil fuel era. Someone will have to draw the lines. Someone will have to say enough is enough and end the destruction. And that end, and I think we can be certain here, will not come from the industries themselves. And it will not come from slow plans to transition to somewhere. Right now, we see that across the world, an expansion and an intention is being planned when it comes to fossil fuels. So as long as fossil fuel industries are planning to expand, someone else will have to say no to that. That's where we're turning to the EIA. That's where we're turning to governments worldwide. That's why we're going to the streets. And we also know that as long as investors like BlackRock, like Deutsche Bank, like Qatar, who are the lead investors of RWE, who we fought against last week, as long as they plan to invest in new fossil fuels, they are on the wrong side here. And maybe they don't want to know that, but we can be very certain about that. And we're not going to shy away from spreading that message.
Thank you, Louisa. Look, one thing that's very clear is that seeing four very powerful activists here on the outside of WEF is very interesting. But in terms of bringing the dialogue with powerful institutions such as the IEA, I think it is absolutely fabulous that A, the four of you are here, but B, that Fatih, you have come as well, because not only are you here, and I think it's great that you are, but you're also got a view to what's going on in there. Now, the ladies have already said that there is inaction going on inside the halls of the Congress. They have already said that there is no sense of action despite the words, despite we've just had COP27. I was at COP26, so we're at COP21, 15. How different is what you're hearing here to the sense of urgency in there, Fatih?
Thanks, Steve. First of all, many thanks for the invitation. I think me being here is already a very important signal that I wanted to give the world. But may I first things first, may I first thank Greta. Vanessa, dear Vanessa, thank you very much. Helena and Louisa, thank you very much what you have been doing. Steve, my message is the following. Energy is responsible about 80% of the emissions causing climate change. Okay, if we are not able to transform the energy sector, we have no chance whatsoever to reach our climate targets. So we have to transform the energy sector. making it clean, making it secure. And when I look at the today, the international agenda, the global agenda, including here in Davos, while we have to see that the climate change needs to get more attention, unfortunately, the attention to climate change is sliding down. I find it rather worrying, and it is the reason I thought it is now time to ring the alarm bells, bring the climate crisis together with other crises, the energy crisis, food crisis, at the top of the international policy agenda. And I think this is my main message. Climate agenda needs to get, it is a priority in the agenda of the decision.
Let me just get something straight, Fatih, because the activists believe there can be no new fossil fuels projects in order to hit 1.5 degrees. You believe there should be no more fossil fuel exploration, production, new facilities to reach 1.5 degrees. Why is it that the most preeminent organization, perhaps globally, certainly amongst consuming nations, is saying that, and yet new production is going ahead?
So, Steve, the issue is we have to keep the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If it goes above that, the rather fragile equilibrium of our planet will be distorted. We'll be all in trouble. In order to do that, we need to get energy from clean, carbon-free energy sources. Okay, and to do that, the magic word is investment. Today, investment clean energy. Today, the world invests about $1.5 trillion. In order to be in line with our climate targets, it needs to go to $4 trillion clean energy investments. And most of them need to come from the developing countries, hopefully with the help of the rich advanced countries. Now, if we do that, if we bring our energy from clean energy sources, then we don't need any more coal, we don't need any more oil and gas, new investments there. But the point of departure is making clean energy investments and having a clean, secure energy future for all. And there is enough money worldwide, there is enough capital. What we have to do is capital and clean energy projects, especially in developing countries, need to meet. And what is missing, in my view, is the international political will. If it was there, this would have happened because we have enough sun, we have enough wind, and electric cars are growing. There's a lot of technological innovation, and we have a lot of potential to see the clean energy to dominate. But unfortunately, what we are seeing today is there's a transition happening, but not at the pace that we would like to see, especially once again in the emerging and developing world.
Thank you, Fatih. Greta, you have spoken inside the realms of the COP process. You have spoken outside of the UNFCCC process. You have been inside WEF talking, and now you're outside. I've done a lot of work just looking at the way you've changed, and you just seem to be on the outside now rather than talking to people on the inside. And I think that's a great shame, because I've been speaking to some amazing people in there the last week, including the Pakistan Minister for Climate Change, who is incredibly powerful about 1,000-kilometer lakes that just appeared, about farmers having to deal with 50-degree plus heat as well. Do you not feel that your very strong voice actually would continue to do good work if you were actually talking to those powerful people and to those people and just giving them some leadership?
Well, first of all, there are already activists doing that. And I think that if there should be activists inside speaking to these people, it should be those on the front lines and not privileged people like me who are not experiencing the first-hand consequences of the climate crisis. But then again, I think that right now the changes that we need are not very likely to come from the inside. Rather, I believe they will come from the bottom up, so to speak, because without public pressure, without massive public pressure from the outside, at least in my experience, and these people are going to go as far far as they possibly can. As long as they can get away with it, they will continue to invest in fossil fuels. They will continue to throw people under the bus for their own gain. So I believe that the changes we need right now needs to happen on the outside. We need to build and create a critical mass of people who demand change, who demand justice. And of course, we could do that also from the inside, but yeah.
I mean, Helena, I mean, Ecuador is suffering its own concerns and deforestation and oil groups and gas groups and what have you. Just tell us again where you see the campaign going forward, because I think many of us feel that we have to be pragmatic in terms of working with and understanding the pressure from the outside as well. How do you see the campaign going forward from here?
I completely agree with Greta that we need to build massive movement of people that are demanding change and are demanding justice. And when we are talking about the energy transition, when we're talking about the green transition, we also need to make sure that that is just. And I think that's really, really important, that we have voices from the places that are being affected both by climate change, but also by the place, what the energy transition would mean for communities on the ground, vulnerable communities. And I think that perspective really needs to be taken into account by the private sector, and it's a perspective that cannot be left out, because if we do that, we're leaving out people again, just like we've done during the entire climate crisis. And I would like to together with Greta, Vanessa, Luisa, and I, we've created a cease and desist letter to oil CEOs, urging the oil CEOs to phase out from new fossil fuel. We know that they knew. There's a report that's come out saying that they knew way before us what they were doing when they were exploring for oil. They knew what the consequences would be of CO2 gas emissions. They knew the irreversible consequences, the huge impact it would have on people's livelihood, the huge impact it would have on the environment. We launched this a couple of days ago, and we're almost reaching 900,000 signatures, which really shows the commitment of youth, what really shows the commitment of civil society and people, and the change that we are demanding. And this is a message to these CEOs and decision makers of how urgently we want and we need change.
And we are very happy to see that this message is in fact in line with what the EIA says very clearly, that there cannot be any fossil fuel expansion happening anywhere. Fossil fuel industries had 40 years time to prove that they're up to anything good. They clearly failed. And so the message is very clear. And this is not just clear to us activists, it is clear to people everywhere, especially those fighting at the front line. So we are very happy for you to be here today, and we would very much invite you to carry on this message with us, Mr. Biro.
So we already have our open letter on 18th of May 2021, when we made the clean transformation of the global energy sector net zero 2050. We made our report. So we are very happy to see that there will be a big increase, hopefully, for clean energy investments, not fossil investments, so that we can both have energy, because energy is a good thing. What is better is the emissions. So we'll have both energy, and we are going to reduce the emissions and their impact on the climate. So I am very happy that our activist colleagues here are pushing this agenda forward.
Luisa, let me just come back to you, and a little gentle pushback as well, because I understand what's been going on at Gettr, and I understand why you were there as well. But when you look at the longer message from Herr Scholz, he said the following: we aim to be 100% energy from renewable sources by 2035. Wind and solar to reach 80% by 2030. Germany will be climate neutral by 2045. This is a good progression. This is a good result in many ways. There are other crises going on in the world. The catchphrase here, and they love a catchphrase here at WEF, is polycrisis. Keeping the lights on in Europe, fighting against the Russians in Ukraine as well. This has created new dynamics and other crises. And I understand what all of you are saying, including Fatih, about climate initiatives slipping down the agenda. but actually the short-term remedies to actually keeping the lights on in Europe, action had to be made. And I know you're going to push back at me there.
Excellent question. Well, what we see since really the climate movement started really emerging in a different scale across the globe, there has been a response by leaders, and that was a friendly message to the PR departments for more green headlines. And so we are very well aware that leaders across the world, and also Mr. Scholz, they know their vocabulary, and they know, where something net zero has to happen and something green has to, be put out. But we don't say listen to the science for a joke. We say, and I think that is clear to people across the world, what effectively counts is the numbers. It's a science. And when we look at what is behind all those big promises, in many cases, and that is the case in Germany, what we see is a public breakup with the Paris Agreement that is being performed. And when I look at countries like Germany, we are on the top 5 of global, of the top polluters worldwide. There are a few countries that are as responsible as Germany and the G7, of course. Who would we turn to if it comes to sticking to pledges made in Paris? Who are those countries are we expect to provide the finance, to provide the industrial transformation, if not those countries, if they don't, start to deliver? And so, luckily enough, the science is clear, the numbers is clear, and we don't have to be fooled anymore. And people are rising up everywhere. Just the other week, there were 30,000 people protesting with us against the extension of the coal mine, with support from across the world. And we're really seeing that the PR strategy that hoped you could just market away the climate crisis is not working out, whereas the people are there and they are willing to tell the truth.
Steve, can I say something here? I think we can have some, when we look at the energy world today, we can have some slight optimism, legitimate optimism here. Because last year, 2022, the amount of renewable capacity coming to markets was the record high. We have never seen so much renewables coming around the world. Very good. The efficiency improvements, very strong, and a lot of clean energy technologies are growing. The issue is there are 2 issues here. One, they are not growing fast enough. They should be to be in line with 1.5. The second, for me, the nerve center of the problem, the emerging and developing countries in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. There is I think, a moral responsibility of the advanced economies to support the clean energy transition in the emerging world. This is key, in my view.
I absolutely agree. And I want to ask Vanessa and Greta a question on this, different questions. Vanessa, one of the key parts of the UN FCC process and COP27 has been that actually financing for developing nations is being seen as absolutely key to the success. We can't just have the rich West finding renewables if there isn't support for the developing nations. Are you seeing any evidence of that on your travels and of course your heartbreaking experiences? Is there any evidence that some of those promises are getting to ground zero?
Well, I can speak from the most recently established Loss and Damage Fund at COP27. It was established, but it's still an empty bucket with no money at all. And coming here at Davos again, you mentioned something about the energy crisis, keeping the lights on for Europe and the West. I understand that this is not the West Economic Forum. This is the World Economic Forum, and many times the discussions about the interests of the Western countries. How can we ensure that we address this? In Europe, how can we ensure that we address this? But then there's been an ongoing energy crisis, for example, in the global south and the African continent for decades, with over 600 million people with no access to basic electricity. So I think that this really needs to be treated like a world economic forum, because I think the world doesn't only constitute of Europe and the West in general. So I just really wanted to say something on that previous question that you asked, that if there is an energy crisis, it's not just in Europe, it has been there for decades. And we need the massive scale up of renewables, especially in communities that are experiencing energy poverty or that have been experiencing energy poverty for decades. So yes, there is a need for that finance for adaptation. There is a need for real money for loss and damage, because with whatever crisis that we see, it's already it's multiple in the countries, for example, in the global south. And even the discussions of 1.5 as the ultimate space of survival, but at 1.2 degrees, it's already a living hell for so many communities across the African continent, across the global south. So when we hear discussions of 1.5 as the place that will save us all, maybe it's a place that will save the Western countries, but at 1.2 it's already catastrophic for so many communities. And that's why it's really important that we cannot have any new fossil fuel investment. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced that the business models of fossil fuel companies are inconsistent with human survival. They're inconsistent with human existence. He already said it's more an economic madness to make any more of these investments. So to ensure that people are protected, not just in the West, but the entire world, we must phase out all new fossil fuels, and that is coal, oil, and gas, and massively support a transition to renewable energy, especially in the global south.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Ros Jones. I'm a paediatrician, and I've been speaking out against COVID-19 vaccines for children for the last 18 months. But we've got way beyond that now. There's an increased all-cause mortality. There are increased side effects from the booster shots. And apart from anything else, they are not effective against any of the current variants. It's simply time to stop the shots.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jana van der Pol and I'm an NHS GP. In my entire career, I've never had any problems giving or receiving vaccines before, but in 2020, I decided not to have a COVID vaccine because I was concerned about the experimental nature of the mRNA platforms used. And in the past couple of years, I've observed a number of my patients present with severe and debilitating long COVID symptoms, not after having COVID, but after receiving their first or second COVID vaccine, or sometimes their boosters. And I've since come to understand that the spike protein itself can be extremely toxic to the human body. And I believe we need to stop deliberately exposing patients to the most toxic part of the COVID virus by giving these vaccines. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dr. Rohan Seth. I'm a former GP. I relinquished my license to practice medicine in 2021 because I did not agree with many of the COVID policies, the lockdowns, the masking, and primarily because of the vaccine rollout. I think these vaccines are unsafe. They're not effective. The rollout is unethical and unnecessary. It's unnecessary to vaccinate children for COVID. It's unethical to vaccinate pregnant women without any long-term studies. The harms being caused by these vaccines are quite apparent now. The excess deaths around the globe are correlating with this vaccine rollout. The media are silent about this. The data is alarming and the vaccines need to be stopped.
I'm Angus Dalgleish. I'm a professor of oncology at St George's, a consultant medical oncologist. And I have started to notice that several of my patients have melanoma who've been stable stage 4 disease. They've had very good immunotherapy or other treatments, and I've been reviewing them from 5 to 20 years. I've noticed that I have now over 6, possibly 7, even an 8th yesterday, who've clearly relapsed following the booster vaccine. At first, we didn't put the two together, but when patients said, I felt awful since the vaccine, I've just been drained, they described symptoms of like a long COVID. And the next thing we know, 2-3 weeks, couple of months later, they've got clear evidence of relapse. And these relapses are quite aggressive. They're not a gentle relapse. They're relapses that are requiring systemic therapy as opposed to a little nodule that requires surgical excision. But it's not just this. I'm now very much aware in my own circle of many people who are having, they haven't got melanoma, but they've never had anything before, but they've got lumps and bumps and they're not feeling well. And 2 people I've interviewed at great length, they all put it down to feeling awful after their booster. They were fine with the first 2 vaccines or just had shivers, flu, etc. But they've described being very tired, very fatigued, wanted to stay in bed. And this is dragged on to the point where they've gone to the doctor and they've had blood counts and investigations. And I now know 7 of them. 2 of them have leukemias and the others have lymphomas. And 1 of them has a very bad myeloma, which he was absolutely sure was instigated by the booster as he developed the dreadful symptoms. So I want to bring to everybody's attention that I think that this does not look like a coincidence to me, and we need to join forces. courses and see if this is a real effect. And if it is, we must stop all the boosters immediately. Thank you.
My name is Fiona. I'm a GP and I'm really concerned about the deterioration I've seen in the health of many of my patients since the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccinations, and in particularly as people have accumulated more doses. The problems include several heart attacks in fit and healthy 40 and 50-year-olds, new asthmatic symptoms in adults with no previous diagnosis, people getting chronic fatigue-type symptoms, shoulder pains, and inflammation that are continuing months after their jab. I'm also concerned about the national and international safety data that suggests something may be terribly wrong with these vaccines and possibly may be causing changes to the immune and the vascular systems that could be long-standing. We're beginning to hear from oncologists and hematologists about unexpected and aggressive cancers, and surgeons and pathologists are talking about multiple blood clotting issues.
Such as the VAR system and yellow card.
With these vaccines.
Effect. And if it is, we must stop all the boosters immediately. Thank you.
My name is Fiona. I'm a GP and I'm really concerned about the deterioration I've seen in the health of many of my patients since the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccinations, and in particularly as people have accumulated more doses. The problems include several heart attacks in fit and healthy 40 and 50-year-olds, new asthmatic symptoms in adults with no previous diagnosis, people getting chronic fatigue-type symptoms, shoulder pains, and inflammation that are continuing months after their jab. I'm also concerned about the national and international safety data that suggests something may be terribly wrong with these vaccines and possibly may be causing changes to the immune and the vascular systems that could be long-standing. We're beginning to hear from oncologists and hematologists about unexpected and aggressive cancers, and surgeons and pathologists are talking about multiple blood clotting issues. I believe it's time we stop the vaccination programme and give weight and consideration to the data. It's unethical for us to vaccinate people or indeed treat people with any medical intervention without being sure that the benefits outweigh the risks. At present, I'm concerned that the risks of continuing this programme greatly outweigh the benefits for the vast majority of patients. Thank you.
My name is Dr. David Cartland. As a GP and a father, I'm astounded and angry that this vaccine has been rolled out to younger and younger cohorts and has recently been authorised for use in the 6-month-old baby to 5-year-old child category. The adverse events data is unprecedented and stacking up week by week in systems that are likely underreported, such as the VAR system and yellow card system. Medicine is all about safety, and given the huge safety signals that the mRNA injections are giving off, we need to stop these shots immediately, pending urgent investigation for the sake of our next generation and children.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Dean Patterson. I am a consultant, general physician, and cardiologist. Since the COVID-19 vaccines have been launched, I've noticed an increasing signal of both myocarditis and myocardial injury. In conjunction with this, I've noticed an increasing signal of thrombosis and other serious adverse events. Prior to the vaccine rollout, I didn't witness any evidence of myocarditis in relation to the COVID infection itself. Over the last 2 years, we've witnessed an increase in the loss of the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines. The COVID-19 vaccines clearly lack durability, and hence the recommendation has constantly been amended to go from first 2 vaccinations followed by a booster to regular campaigning for ongoing booster vaccination. If there was a very clear absence of serious harms, then this strategy might be acceptable. However, in light of my serious concerns, I believe we should halt the rollout of the vaccination program and perform a thorough investigation into the serious adverse events. After all, the preliminary studies that have been done in these vaccines are yet to be completed in 2023, and almost the entire placebo group in these studies has now been vaccinated, making extrapolation of the harms extremely difficult. At present, we're seeing a wave of non-COVID excess mortality, which brings me to my conclusion that there is serious harm in association with the vaccine rollout. And until proven otherwise, these vaccines are not safe.
My name is Dr. Anna Forbes, and I place tremendous importance on listening to what my patients have to say to me. And many of my patients have been telling me that they've been feeling increasingly unwell to varying degrees since their COVID-19 vaccinations, and that they have not been listened to by their usual doctors, and this has not been investigated any further. And I believe that this whole situation demands immediate and deep investigation.
Hello, I'm Tony Hinton, a London surgeon. I know many people who've had the COVID vaccine and then caught COVID. I also know a lot of people that have had side effects following the COVID vaccine. So what do we think? Safe and effective, or just stop the shots?
My name is Dr. Julia Wilkins, and I'm a consultant in obstetrics and gynecology. In the UK, the MHRA is tasked with the monitoring of adverse events related to the use of medicines or devices in healthcare. As a regulator, they are supposed to take action when significant safety signals are recognised. The MHRA has regularly published summaries of yellow card reports submitted by people who have experienced adverse events after a COVID-19 vaccine. The summary published on the 1st of December 2022 indicates almost 500,000 reports, which is about 1 in 114 people who have received a vaccine. This includes 2,362 deaths. It also includes over 30,000 acute cardiac events and almost 300,000 nervous system disorders, as well as many more serious and potentially life-threatening conditions. Whilst these reports obviously cannot be taken as proof of causality, these numbers are huge and as such unprecedented, and also reflected in the adverse events reporting systems in the US, in Europe, and by the WHO. Meanwhile, it has become clear that COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent infection or transmission. They are meant to reduce hospitalization and death, but even compared to the first year of the pandemic, a significant increase in excess mortality has been observed in the last 2 years. This increase across all age groups has occurred, at least in Scotland, in temporal association with the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. There has also been a significant increase in cardiac morbidity, and now several studies indicating COVID-19 vaccines to increase the risks of myocarditis. Unprecedented numbers of sudden death in all age groups, including children, have been reported, also including many athletes suddenly collapsing in training or on the playing field. Post-marketing surveillance is essential when a new pharmaceutical product is given to the majority of populations without robust and long-term safety data, as even the regulatory trials were ended prematurely. If this was taken as seriously as we have always assumed it would be, These numerous and alarming safety signals should have led to a thorough investigation whilst halting any further administrations. It is inconceivable that to date this has not been pursued. And so, in the interest of the safety of our population, we must call for an immediate and comprehensive evaluation of all the available data. And whilst this investigation is ongoing, we must stop the shots.
It's not possible and irresponsible to declare a new pharmaceutical product safe in pregnancy. Time is needed to monitor the unborn baby and then the growing child. Have we forgotten thalidomide? It's not evidence-based medicine to tell pregnant women to take these shots. We have got to stop the shots.
Dr. Teslari here. There's more than enough evidence to show that the COVID injections are not safe and they're not effective. Let's stop the shots now.
Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Craig, co-chair of the Health Advisory and Recovery team. I want to talk to you about why what you have been told about these COVID vaccines does not stand up to scrutiny. First of all, regarding safety, there are a number of problems that have been recognised as linked to vaccination with people who have been injured by them. But there's also a reason to be concerned about cardiac disease risk as a result of vaccination, and this needs to be investigated. So the reasons for concern are as follows. First of all, there was a paper that showed people who had been vaccinated had higher scores on risk factors that lead to coronary artery disease. Secondly, there was a study that came out of Israel showing a 25% increase in cardiac arrest and coronary syndromes in 16 to 39-year-olds. We saw in England 14,000 more cardiac arrests in 2021 than there were in 2020. We've seen a rise in cardiac excess deaths, which has happened since the beginning of the vaccine rollout and continues now with no other explanation for them. We've seen post-mortem studies that have linked vaccine to such cardiac deaths, including one where vaccine-induced spike protein was present in the muscle of the heart, and another where there was vaccine-induced inflammation of the arteries of the heart that caused death in somebody 4 months after their last dose. We've also had a problem with data not being shared. And one concern I have is that the Office of National Statistics were producing regularly data on deaths by vaccination status, but have produced nothing since May 2022. Finally, you may have heard the claim that 20 million lives have been saved by these vaccines, but that does not stand up to scrutiny. It is another fantasy based yet again on modelling that bears no relation to the real world data. So it's time to stop these shots and start an investigation into these cardiac excess deaths.
Dr. Elizabeth Evans, retired doctor and director of the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. There is now overwhelming evidence showing that the COVID vaccines are neither safe enough nor effective, and that the risks far outweigh the benefits, particularly for the young and healthy. This violates a fundamental principle of medical ethics, that we must first do no harm. The rollout has also been carried out in a way that undermines the ethical process of informed consent, with coercive policies and messaging, exaggeration of benefits, and failure to fully disclose risks. It is time to halt the rollout. We must stop the shots.
Hi, I'm Dr. Angela Musa, international GP, former UK HSA public health officer. COVID-19 vaccines are not safe and effective due to insufficient evidence.
Billy Ralph, family physician, Ireland. These jabs, these COVID vaccines are not as safe and effective as alleged, and they're especially not safe or effective for children. So stop the jabs.
Dr. Ali Ajaz, consultant forensic psychiatrist, lecturer, researcher. I left the NHS because I refused to take the COVID-19 jab. I refused to take the jab because I did my own research. COVID-19 jabs are not safe and they are not proven effective. And this is the experience of frontline doctors across the world and published scientific research. If you look for it, you will see it. It's time to do the right thing. Let's stop the jabs now.
Of such a person, but I think there's another definition that comes to mind. I think that in years to come, when dictionaries are trying to decide how to describe and define the word courage, they might say such a quality as President Zelensky of Ukraine demonstrated during the Russian invasion of his country. So without any further ado, the first order of business is we will hear directly from Kyiv live from the President of Ukraine. I will take 1 second before to just let you all know that we have a very special situation right now, which is the First Lady of Ukraine is in the audience, and she will be watching her husband. Mr. President,
ladies and gentlemen, 10 hours ago, a tragedy happened near Kyiv. The helicopter crash claimed lives of the Minister of the Internal Affairs of Ukraine, his colleagues, and helicopter crew when it fell near a kindergarten. 14 of Ukrainian families lost their loved ones today, and many more families are losing daily because of the war. And I shall ask you to honor the memory of every person Ukraine has lost with a minute of silence, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for this minute. Only 1 minute, but it keeps the memory about so many people. Ukraine lives thousands of such minutes, including 3 minutes on January 14. 3 minutes. The time it took for a Russian missile to travel hundreds of kilometers, hit a residential block in Dnipro and kill at least 45 people. 45, and that's children, 45. My address will be short, about the time we are short of, about small minutes, about years made of these minutes. 3 years ago, I spoke at Davos for the first time in person. The topic was how to build a cohesive and sustainable world. I'm talking online now, and the topic is how to cooperate in a divided, fragmented world. Conclusions, they are obvious. The world cannot keep the pace with changes and challenges. The list of crises, global security, environmental, food security, energy ones, needs to be amended with another one, the time crisis. The list of calls for decisive, efficient joint actions needs to be expanded with one more, the call for speed, the speed of decisions making, reaction of the civilized world. Tragedies are outpacing life. The tyranny is outpacing the democracy. Russia needed less than 1 second to start the war. The world needed days to react with first sanctions. The time the free world uses to think is used by the terrorist state to kill. Ukraine and its allies have been resisting it for almost a year. This period proved all our prompt actions brought positive results. The opening of European borders for Ukrainians, the Green Deal, the energy unity. Together, they saved millions of lives, and not only in Ukraine. It is not only Ukraine, but the whole world needs exactly this pace of decisions and actions. The world was hesitant in 2014 when Russia, without hesitation, occupied the Crimea. The world was hesitant in 2022 when Russia, without hesitation, made the war full scale. The world must not.
When I started understanding VAERS vaccine, even way back 21 months ago, I had to make a video for torts class. The professor came to me and said, "Hey, the other guys don't understand economics. Can you do this one?" Yeah, sure. So I did it on VAERS. And I don't think he was too happy in the end. He's actually representing the school against me in my lawsuit now. I want the data. I want them to stop, but I want them to stop vaccine. Just completely stop it. I have enough data and I show enough death for there to be an injunction in joining the state from allowing anybody to be vaccinated. What happened? In 2020, it was a year of respiratory deaths. I'm going to show you that, of which pneumonia is a big one, right? Everybody knows about COVID pneumonia. And then all of a sudden, on a year boundary, everything switches over in terms of the excess death. And in 2021, you got lots of clots. There's all kinds of heart problems. There's all kinds of blood death. When I say blood, clots and bleeding in the heart, brain, lungs, and other places. And what happened? The change from 2020 to 2021, they were 10 years younger. COVID and respiratory deaths went down, while at the same time, clots and bleeds and heart attacks and strokes. And you hear about myocarditis all the time. Myocarditis is 1% of the overall circulatory and other deaths from the vaccine itself. The vaccine's killing 2 orders of magnitude more people than myocarditis. So that's a pet peeve of mine to only talk about myocarditis. And you also have a respiratory virus being seasonal. It's on in the winter and off in the summer. The excess deaths are not that way. when you look at 2021. The excess deaths are a steady state all year long. So you got an age difference, symptom difference, and season difference. This is not COVID that we've been hit with since January 2021. Something else is killing everybody, and they're writing down COVID, and they're writing down other stuff on death certificates. It's all a big lie. So here's what I'm going to show you in this presentation. Once you introduce the vaccine, all-cause death goes down year over year from 2020 to 2021. COVID goes down, respiratory goes down, while at the same time they go down, the blood and blood forming goes up, circulatory system, including the heart, goes up, and blood-related cancers go up. If there's an inverse relationship between COVID and the blood causes of death, you cannot relate them to COVID. Okay, D codes blood, I codes circulatory, and C codes cancer. J codes are respiratory. COVID is U071. We'll get into that. Guys in their 50s who received the vaccine shortly thereafter expired, usually thrombosis related. It's clots, right? Clots are killing so many people. I went into VAERS in July 23rd, 2021. The shot had only been out for 6 months or so. By then, VAERS had said 5,627 died, 5,627 deaths in VAERS, average age of 73. And I found all these by using string searches and word searches. A clot, 15,000 clot, thrombo, which includes thrombotic, thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, it's all different thrombo words, 5,900, stroke, 9,700, 9,700 people had reported strokes after getting the vaccine by July of 2021. Insane. That's 18 months ago. That's a long time ago. So I get carditis, aneurysm. I even spelled aneurysm wrong to see if any knuckleheads put in the wrong spelling, and I was right. 74 people spelled aneurysm wrong, but there were 1,200 people wrote it right. Carditis was 4,600. And then interestingly, I'm like, what are the symptoms of stroke where people might have input something and they don't know that they had a stroke, or it was before they were diagnosed with a stroke? Sure enough, vomit came up 27,682 times, and headache came out 133,988 times. This has been going on a very long time. I've known about it, but this won't end until everybody knows somebody. Guillain-Barré was already up to 888 by then. This is a lot of teenagers dead from clots and heart attacks. Teenagers dead from clots and heart attacks from February to June 2021. 19 years old, 19, 15, 16, 19, 17, 15. Now, you'd say, when did they get the shots? Why would they be getting shots in March, April, and so forth? Some were more eligible for it, right? So they'd say, oh, you're already immunocompromised for whatever you have. It actually, it's sad to say, it cleaned out some unhealthy teenagers. You read the reports, you get to see that. But there were also very healthy people as well. For instance, year-old blood clot, 17-year-old massive CVST brain bleed. That's a cerebral venous sinus thrombosis type of stroke. Okay. We'll get to that later. Year-old nausea, vomiting, discharged, then died. That's a stroke. Couldn't figure out it was a stroke in a kid. They probably couldn't figure it out because kids don't get these things. They just don't.
Doctors are presented with patients that are dying for reasons that is supposed to be pretty much impossible.
So pericardial effusion, a 16-year-old killed him. Cardiac arrest in a 17-year-old. Myocarditis in a 13-year-old. This is June of 2021. All these are June except for that CVST was May. We've known since then, or they've known, if they were doing the job, I'm one guy with a computer in my basement, and I can figure this out. Brainstem herniation, 13-year-old boy, 18 days after vaccination, stroke death. I'm going to show you Diane in March, Brianna in April, Eden in June, and then this guy dies. You don't understand it. They're just killing people. There's a 19-year-old girl. She was a Northwestern student. She was the first one I came across before I got the data. And I read this one in June 2021. Beautiful young lady, starting out her life in college, and she takes the vaccine, and she went through hell. They did a heart transplant on her. This poor girl. All right, so let's get into the Massachusetts data. You guys ready? All right. So these are all-cause deaths from everything. Now, if I made every year a different color, it's a mess. So I thought, why don't I just make 2015 through 2019? I'll just make it all red. So I made it all red, and I did every single day. This is daily. And you can see the red makes a nice band of what you would consider normal. And then all of a sudden there's this big, huge black line coming up out of there. It's, wow, that's a pandemic. How long is that? That's 9 weeks. That's only 9 weeks. That's a pandemic for 9 weeks. What do you see in black and blue? Black is 2020. Blue is 2021. There's no pandemic. There's no pandemic. It's over. 9 weeks and it was over. If you look at the bottom graph, what really bothered me is the fact that this blue line starts in around June, late June, July, really, and it just stays above zero the entire rest of the year. Now, it doesn't look like much because the graph is tuned to the big first wave. But if the big first wave wasn't there and the graph was tuned to the blue, that blue would look pretty big. And I'll tell you what it is. It's between 10 and 20 extra deaths per day, more than normal, every single day for half a year. That's a couple of thousand excess deaths in the second half of 2021. So it's just crazy numbers. And when you separate it out like I did, which you'll see, you start to understand what's happening here. Now, the only reason the blue actually went down to zero is because this huge wave from 2020, that's mostly over 85s. It canceled out all the 60 to 84 deaths that were occurring. It canceled them out, the deficit. And once the well was dry from all the people who couldn't die a second time, and the 85 started dying again, then the blue line starts rising above zero. So truth be told, the fact is, the blue line, if you look for 60, 65 as a beginning, up to 84, if I just did that age group, this line would be above zero the entire way.
Yeah.
People have been dying steady state since the vaccine began. Now, I don't have this slide in the format of the narrow center like I wanted to do for this. It's just too complicated. I'll explain the slide anyway. In the top left, you have 2020. It's complicated. I'll get you through it, though.
Sure.
And you have the semi-monthly periods on the left and the age groups across the top. And then you see this dark area of standard deviations above norm, above mean. That's a pandemic right there. That's it. And you see it's in only the older age groups. You have a little bit of 60 to 64, but then you have mostly 65 and up, with the 85s getting crushed. And it's very short. But then there's nothing. The summer, there's nothing. And if you follow it down to this graph, you have the big wave, and then you have the nothing. And then down here, you have this little wave starting. And that's not significant. It's a respiratory virus that's happening in the winter, starting around December. and there it is. Now let's look at 2021. This graph continues, by the way. I put the two graphs next to each other so you can see them. So on the bottom of 2021, right? Now, in the 65 to 74 and 75 to 79, let's just call it 65 to 79 in this big rectangle with the rounded corners that's dark brown. It's a steady state of death all year long. And what happens is this deficit in blue, because these are negative numbers, the deficit in the blue rectangle, follow that over here, 85 plus deficit, February to July cancels the 60 to 84 excess. And that right there. That's why that graph dropped down to zero. And here's the difference between me and every other researcher in the world that has CDC data. I shouldn't say me. Here's the difference between having record level source data like I have and having bundled crap data like the CDC gives every other researcher in the world.
You mean the aggregate numbers that we get shown everywhere, that everybody quotes everywhere?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Because they haven't gone to source. You've gone to the source. You're actually pulling death certificates instead of what the CDC says happened.
Exactly. From the very beginning, I don't want the CDC telling me these are the heart deaths. And then people say, oh, heart deaths are up a little bit. They're not up a little bit. They're up a lot. You just don't have the right codes you're looking at because you can't disassemble it. You get a bundle from CDC and you have one thing going up and one thing going down, and they cancel each other. That's why I'm the only one in the world who's come across how to, and it's not me, everybody. I'm not a genius. I'm not that smart. I'm a 1%er. I worked with 0.01% of intelligence in the world, guys. I'm in the 1%. I always test it in the 1%, but I'm nowhere near 0.1% or even 0.01%.
Yeah,
I just got lucky.
The deficit, I need a little bit of clarification on the deficit. So we had fewer than expected all-cause in that age group, which is the high age group, the 80s?
85 plus.
Yeah, and that's basically what you're saying is that we did such a good job of killing our octogenarians the previous year that we're in a deficit. We were now owe back some octogenarian deaths because way too many died in 2020.
Yes. Yeah, there were many nonagenarians. I think it's NON, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
They got cleaned out, man. They got cleaned out.
Yeah.
And then the people over 100, you give a shot to them, they're gone.
For anyone that's just listening, straight up listening right now, you'll have to come watch this afterwards. And we'll be making videos out of this, so no worries there. But he's heat mapped the colors, and once you get into the 90s there, it's just dark blood, crimson. It's just the 90-year-olds that got slayed.
Yep. There's a 98-year-old in Vermont I have the death certificate for and a VAERS record. I correlated it to a VAERS record. They gave her a shot. Her heart rate went up to 145 beats per minute right away. And for 2 days, and at the end of 2 days, her heart can't take that, man. She had a heart attack. So on the death certificate, it says she died from a heart attack. No mention of a vaccine that kicked her heart up to 145 and ran her out of beats.
Yeah.
They killed her. She was 98. Oh, yeah, so what? It's not so what. It's an indication that the vaccine reacted with a human being and gave them tachycardia. I'll show you tachycardia maybe later.
Excellent.
So what I did was, if you look and it says investigate next slide down here in the bottom right.
Yes.
What I did was I looked in 2021 and I'm like, okay, these numbers are really high. There's 10.5 and 9.3. So I said, first,
Metabiota produces bioagents under diplomatic cover at secret labs, then sells pandemic insurance and trackers to help countries get ahead of what they are putting out. The company is part of the Pentagon's DRTA program as well as funded by Rosemont Seneca, run by Hunter Biden. Metabiota partners with industry and governments worldwide to build resilience to epidemics and protect global health. Metabiota Inc. was tapped by the Sierra Leonean government and the World Health Organization to help monitor the spread of the virus and support the response after Ebola was discovered circulating in neighboring Guinea in March 2014. Metabiota was contracted by the Pentagon to perform work for DTRA before and during the Ebola crisis in West Africa and was awarded $3.1 million for work in Sierra Leone, one of the countries at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak. The Ebola outbreak was in 2014 to 2015. Biowarfare scientists using diplomatic cover test man-made viruses at Pentagon on biolabs in 25 countries across the world. These U.S. biolaboratories are funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, or DTRA, under a $2.1 billion military program. Metabiota sponsored a viral surveillance for the PREDICT program 2014 to 2017. The 2017 study was supported by U.S. aid through the Emerging Pandemic Threats PREDICT project. Co-authors include Nathan Wolf at Metabiota, Peter Dasak and William Kersh at EcoHealth Alliance and the PREDICT Consortium. The authors declared no conflicts. From Newsfront.
The USA is gaining total control over biological research facilities, researchers' facilities, researchers, and stocks of deadly viruses in Ukraine. By a lucky chance, Metabiota, a subcontractor, is sharing the building with Black & Veatch in Kiev. This will allow the USA to control epidemiological situations in the region, get access to every development in the sphere, and manipulate population size while increasing American pharmaceutical corporations' profit.
Let's go look at Kiev back in 2018. Also a reminder of who was in charge of Ukraine for the Obama administration.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. Look, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Or how about we flash back to 2016 Ukraine, about the laboratories built in Ukraine in 2014 to 17. It seems that only Americans work there, and the Pentagon finances them. They counted 11 secret laboratories in Ukraine through which dangerous diseases spread. The official document indicates that U.S. military doctors are studying the use of pathogens of especially dangerous infections in different regions of Ukraine. This is confirmed by outbreaks of dangerous infectious diseases. This all occurred during the Obama administration, and VP Biden was the point person for Ukraine and China. Rosemont Seneca, an investment firm led by Hunter Biden, was a lead financial backer of Metabiota, a pandemic tracking and response firm that has partnered with Peter Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Pilot Growth Management is currently the #1 investor in Metabiota. Neil Callahan is the co-founder, who is also the co-founder of Rosemont Seneca.
Neil Callahan, a name that appears many times on Hunter Biden's hard drive, also sits on Metabiota's board of advisors.
They were literally investing in a biolab company which houses and tracks deadly pathogens, then creates tracking and global virus outlooks and the marketing and pandemic insurance to go along with it. Here's to Metabiota and their ingenious, evil scheme. Who does this? Dr. Nathan Wolfe, the guy from the bat study and numerous other studies. Oh yeah. And another familiar face appears. Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm sure they just had dinner. In 2017, Metabiota announced some partnerships and set itself up to become the innovator of pandemic insurance. Not many countries would understand that they needed it. Or did they?
Munich Reinsurance Company, the largest global reinsurer, and in QTEL Inc., the strategic investor that accelerates the development of technologies to support the U.S. intelligence community, have signed strategic agreements with Metabiota. Working in collaboration, Marsh, Munich Re, and Metabiota developed Pathogener X. It uses triggers such as Metabiota's new pathogen sentiment index, which the epidemic risk specialist launched recently.
I told you so, says Metabiota. You should have bought our pandemic insurance in 2018. The perfect setup for what's next. Reminder, they are housing and tracking deadly pathogens.
AI modeling driven by companies such as Blue Dot and Metabiota anticipated the coronavirus in China before it caught the world by surprise in late 2019 by both scouting its impact and its spread.
Of course they did. Now, everyone wants to partner with Metabiota and their expertise. Do you want to partner with Metabiota? Do you trust their expertise? This might be your last chance to choose.